Hello and welcome to episode 10 of the Croydon Constitutionalist podcast, bringing classical liberalism to South London and beyond via YouTube, Stitcher and Apple Podcasts. My name is Dan Heaton and my partner in podcasting today is Mike Swadling, the co-founder of the Croydon Constitutionalist. Now Mike, it's been a couple of months now since we did our last podcast. I think one or two things may have happened in the world of politics. What have we got to talk about today?
Yes, indeed. So we have a new Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. We'll be talking about that. Where we are with Brexit, as always, and of course where we are in Parliament on that. A new cabinet has come with a new Prime Minister. So Priti Patel's been pretty vocal on knife crime and other things. Let's talk a bit about the new cabinet. Campaign I'm involved in Croydon, one for a democratically elected Mayor of Croydon. So new local campaign, you're going to see a lot of it over the next 9 months, year. So chance to talk about that. We have another Taxpayers Alliance Street Stall, this time in Selsdon. And of course we have our infamous Leavers of Croydon drinks coming up on Wednesday.
Cheers Mike. So Mr Johnson, he won the Conservative Party leadership and has been made therefore Prime Minister. Pretty strong mandate, I have to say. Got over 50% of the MPs when there were three on the ballot paper, as it were. Obviously, as part of that, went through to the final two to the Conservative Party membership and got about 66% of the membership with a very clear message of leaving on the 31st of October with no ifs or no buts. And he's reiterated that since taking on the position of Prime Minister. How do you think he's doing so far in that regard?
On Brexit, he's proving to be the winner that many people thought he was before. He won Labour London twice. He won a referendum. He won in Parliament, as you've just said, that he couldn't win. And he's got that same drive and enthusiasm to win on Brexit. You sense there's a sense of purpose about the government at the moment. There's a sense of purpose in this country, and that's partly that we're going to leave, but it's partly on a few other things. It may all be bluster with Boris, you're never quite sure, but certainly the bluster is there and working at the moment. People truly believe he's leaving on the 31st of October. I think most MPs have accepted that now, and the ones that are fighting against it seem to come up with these more and more ludicrous plans to try and stop it, as if it's, I don't know, an episode of Game of Thrones or something, rather than the Parliament. Pottier and pottier each minute, really.
You're definitely right about the sense of purpose. There can be no doubt that for the next couple of months at least, the government seems to be dedicated to that leaving date. They have come forward with a few proposals about other matters. People think that they're looking not just at Brexit on the 31st of October, but they're heading into a general election, whether that's be before that date or shortly thereafter. And we can go on to the reasons behind that, why that might have to happen. But as part of that belief, Boris has brought in Dominic Cummings, who of course was the brains behind the Vote Leave part of the Leave campaign back in 2016. Famously, he's been depicted by was it Cumberbatch in I think it was a Channel 4 documentary that I've still not seen actually. Apparently, it's quite good. But
it's remarkably good and reasonably fair.
Fair dues. He's been brought in, and it seems to me that there's a clear message, not just on Brexit, but it's the people, or it's Parliament versus the people, seems to be the message that they're going for. Which then may lead into a general election. Obviously, Dominic Cummings, a great political strategist, that has been proven on a few occasions now, and maybe that's why he's involved. Seems to be getting all of the departments that would be involved in Brexit and trade and things we need to deal with post-Brexit all together and working in one direction, pulling in the same direction, which it appears, we suspected it was the case, but appears to have not been the case under Theresa May. Suggestions that Mr Hammond, the now ex-Chancellor of the Exchequer, well, he wasn't really preparing for no deal whatsoever.
All these stories that are coming out about Philip Hammond are unbelievably shocking. if you're charged with a job, if you've run on a manifesto, even if you don't agree with it, don't do it, as in leave the job, but you're charged with the job of Chancellor of the Exchequer to prepare Britain for a no-deal Brexit. And let's be honest, most of the past year or so, in fact since the invocation of Article 50, that has been a substantially likely outcome, either by conspiracy or cock-up. That's been a chance of happening. Now, I know we want it, but clearly many in the government didn't. But it surely was a duty, even if you don't want it, even if you're acting in terms of the political machinations to stop it, you actually have some staff, when you've got tens of thousands of staff, you actually have some staff preparing just in case. And it's a massive dereliction of duty, the stuff that Hammond's been reported now to be getting up to.
Well, no question, and those were we're talking there about shenanigans that were going on within the Theresa May government. We've seen some shenanigans previously in Parliament, the let-win Cooper Bowles sort of triumvirate or what have you. But we've now had some very strange suggestions coming through in the last couple of weeks. Crikey, you can certainly tell it's August, can't you? It's the silly season. When Caroline Lucas came forth with her wonderful idea about a cross-party all-female cabinet that naturally she would lead, and then got criticised by the left for it not including any black ladies.
It is shocking how Caroline Lucas cannot think of the concept of to have some sort of racial balance. Now, I suspect she hasn't thought, and that kind of underlines how she couldn't find anyone of colour in Parliament that agrees with her point of view. Makes you wonder about her thought process. I won't speculate on it. I'll leave you to do that. But if I don't mind an all-female cabinet. I'd even accept Caroline Lucas leading it, perhaps. But it would just be full of Priti Patel and Gisela Stewart and Kate Hoey, and a vast array of other female leaders that believe in democracy, which clearly something Caroline doesn't.
Well, quite. And speaking of people who are not that keen on democracy, we're now talking about a government of national unity, a government that is literally against the expressed wishes of the people. There's been talk of Hilary Benn leading this, of Harriet Harman leading this, but that doesn't chime well with Mr Corbyn, who has written to various people, various party leaders and just random MPs, suggesting that he should be a caretaker Prime Minister, and that there should then be a general election and probably a second referendum and Lord knows what else. Some people seem to be prepared to talk to him about it. Others seem to have, just said no. We're not going to be putting you in charge of anything really. So this government of national disunity, views.
It's so. Many of you may know I post most of the articles up on the Leavers of Croydon Facebook page, and most mornings I find a bunch of articles and post them up that over the day people can read and engage with the Facebook page, and if you don't follow it, Leavers of Croydon, look for our Facebook page, very popular and lots of comments and discussion on there. I've not been posting up many of these articles about the government of national unity because conspiracy theory websites and just plain bonkers stuff I tend to try to avoid, and I have to say firmly these ideas have been in that category. You mentioned Jeremy Corbyn's letter there. He didn't write to Anna Soubry. Now all right, Anna won't have been able to read it after midday because she'd have been in the bar, but whatever you think of Anna Soubry, she does actually have a few MPs in her group. Arguably more than Jeremy Corbyn does in his, because I don't think you can call most of the Parliamentary Labour Party his group. And to have failed to write to her, it just smacks of incompetence. Incompetence, I don't agree with Jeremy's politics, but if he's not even competent enough to be able to write to the right people, how does he think he's competent enough to run a government of national unity?
Indeed. So Now, this idea of this government of national unity, this is one of the parliamentary shenanigans that might come about. The starting point would be a vote of no confidence in the government, and then Jeremy Corbyn, in his plan, would effectively be voted in as this caretaker prime minister. But that's only one of the options that may be available to Parliament to try to stop a no-deal Brexit. However, it's quite possible that the government can just fight their way through that. Firstly, they might not lose the vote of no confidence, because although the parliamentary majority, even including the DUP, is now down to one after the sort of farce of the Brecon by-election. But as you say, there are Anna Soubry may not wish to put Jeremy Corbyn in, if that's the option that's on the table. And there are quite a few Labour MPs who would vote in confidence. Well, they might not. They might abstain, and this is the issue. There might be Conservative Party MPs who may abstain if they think the option is Jeremy Corbyn. So the numbers aren't quite as obvious as they first seem as to what would happen in that instance. Even then, there's a 14-day period in which to find a new government, or else the existing government can find that it suddenly has the confidence of Parliament. But unless they can find a Prime Minister / a government that can have the confidence of Parliament, then we go to a general election. That general election cannot be held any sooner than 7 weeks after the vote of no confidence, which by my calculation takes us pretty much up to the 31st of October. So this is a pretty desperate bid on the one hand. The other suggestions, the other parliamentary chicanery would be to try to force the hand of the Prime Minister to seek a further extension. But what's interesting about that is even though the law which was passed very hurriedly back in March, it only said that the Prime Minister then had to seek an extension. Obviously the EU would have to offer that extension. Didn't say that the Prime Minister had to accept that offer. So if the terms of that offer are so egregious, or they just don't fancy it, they can turn it down. So there are ways around this, and I think that's where perhaps with people now in the Cabinet and with Dominic Cummings and with the desire and the drive to get us out on the 31st of October, even if it's only because, hey, Boris, etc., are in favour of saving the Conservative Party from future political oblivion, it seems to be there, and I think there's a good chance that we can get out.
Yeah, agreed. Dominic Cummings has taken back control of this whole process. SPADs are working. He's made it clear that they're pro-Parliament if necessary. They've made it clear that any law they don't have to follow, they won't if it goes against us leaving on the 31st of October. And these are only the tactics that Burko and the disgrace of the rump Parliament of traitors that we have been doing to get us delayed past the 29th of March in the first place. They really have set out their stall. It feels like if Boris has to, he will prorogue Parliament. I hope he will, if need be. I no interest in parliamentary sovereignty. It's the sovereignty of the people of Britain that matters, and they made their feelings clear. And as you say, Dan, it wouldn't take much to get it to the 1st of November. Indeed, that's been speculated in The Spectator as on general election date. Now, the keen among you all know that that's a Friday. There's no reason why we can't have an election on Friday. It's just convention that we have it on a Thursday. That would, if we leave on the 31st and Boris has an election of Parliament versus the people on the Friday, I imagine Boris will be carried shoulder high into Downing Street.
Indeed, and that's where I think, where I mentioned earlier that there are a number of Labour MPs, not just the sort of the old guard of Kate Hoey, etc., who are staunch Brexiteers, but those MPs who are prepared to respect the will of the people, perhaps whether they are true Democrats or perhaps because they represent constituencies with a very high Leave vote, they know that they will be toast. Now, whether those people will vote for the Conservative Party, whether they vote for the Brexit Party, that may very much depend upon whether and when a general election occurs. Certainly, I think I'm with you on the sense that I think that if we have left by the time there is a general election, I think Boris has got a very good chance of securing quite a substantial Conservative majority. It's a question of whether or not the general election, is there going to be a general election, and if so, is it before or is it after we have left? Mike, it looks like the government's certainly on looking to have a general election at some point. It's certainly gearing up for it. Do you think we're going to have one, and when do you think it'll be?
I think we will have one. I think it will be February, March. March probably, thinking about it in terms of timing. The majority of one can't last. There are a number of MPs who, when we do leave on the 31st, and I think we will, most likely, will lose their stuff altogether. Sam Gyimah is the sort of person that springs to mind. There's a number of Tories that shouldn't be there as Conservatives. They're not Conservative. They've no interest in backing a Conservative government. If Sajid Javid comes along with a proposal to lower tax, you can imagine that they will expect to see nationalisation of industries and hiring of tax. These people are, the Conservatives can't rely on them, and they're done in the party. Boris needs to firm up a true majority, 30 plus seats. And the country needs some certainty. And I think that could come from a general election early next year after we've left. And it will just be slightly into next year for the mechanics of leaving. Although interestingly, actually, from the Conservatives' point of view, Labour has so many activists on the ground. If they'd done it in winter snow of January, that could really work well for the Conservatives. But anyhow, they internally into next year, that's got to be the time. It will be an interesting question about what happens about these turncoat Tories, the ones that Hammond, Barwell, Gyimah, Grieve, all these people who stood on Conservative election manifestos, are members of the Conservative Party, had no interest in delivering the 2017 manifesto, in fact have acted against it, and in no way fit into a Boris Johnson government. What's going to happen with them, and whether Boris can manoeuvre a way to frankly get them off the ticket is going to be a big question. And if he indeed mentioned the Brexit Party earlier, if there's a deal to be done with them, and I don't know that there is or there's any interest in doing it, those are the seats that Boris could give up.
Yeah, I think could he give them up if the likes of Hammond was restanding? Well, it depends how far they go with this. Certainly if general election came about because people like Philip Hammond voted down the government in a vote of no confidence, the whip would have to be immediately removed and he could not stand as a Conservative candidate. That would be the same with anybody else. Not entirely sure what would happen in those situations where they abstained, but you'd have to think there would be an issue there. I think the Brexit Party is more likely to win some of those traditional Labour seats than the Conservatives would be, but is there a deal to be done? Certainly Dominic Cummings, who would be running any such election campaign, he's like he's like, this is my team and we're going that way. Him and Farage don't get on a personal level at all, and they're not overly, they're quite disparaging about each other in the way that they treated each other during the referendum campaign. Certainly Cummings' view was that he didn't want Farage involved at all in the official campaign, and you will have noticed that he wasn't. So I'm not sure how much of a deal could be done. As I say, if there's a general election in, let's say, March of next year, and we have left the European Union, it may be that there's not much call at that juncture for the Brexit Party. Time will tell as to how that develops, but it may not be necessary. I certainly hope that if there is to be a general election before the next one is due, I do hope it's next year. I think we don't need any more trouble towards the end of the year, really.
No one's going to thank a party that causes an election before it has to happen. I suspect Boris and certainly someone like Dominic Cummings will know this, and they will, I imagine, need to be pushed into or be seen to be pushed into a general election, even if it's one they've actually been ready and waiting for. I completely agree with your point about the Brexit Party and what and how some of these Conservatives might be removed from office, or it would only be if they forced the issue how they could be removed. But I do think there is a wider point here. If the Conservatives if Boris wants to govern with a Conservative government, he needs to find a way to remove from the picture of any value these MPs that have constantly fought against the party, and that might be that you try and win a big enough majority so that you can just ignore them. Ideally, in a way, perhaps you suspend them, or you just make their lives such a hell they leave. But whatever it is, the need of the Brexit Party is to force Brexit. There's a secondary requirement, which is to ensure that we have a democracy and that our Parliament listens to the people. If Boris and Cummings really want to get rid of the threat from the Brexit Party, they need to get rid of those people that are part of the Conservatives that really showed contempt for the British people. If they move them away as well, then it's very hard to make a case for the Brexit Party.
Yeah, because it's one of the arguments of the Brexit Party would be that, well, yes, perhaps Boris Johnson is a leaver, as it were, but you can't trust the Tories to deliver on this. Perhaps if they have delivered on it, and if the people can see that those people who've particularly tried to stop the government delivering on the wishes of the people are no longer involved, or are so cast aside that they're irrelevant, that then perhaps that aspect of their argument and their reason for existence will go away. But time will tell. So we've talked about Boris Johnson's government, the direction it's going in, and particularly in terms of Brexit. But there have been some interesting appointments to his new cabinet, and a few notable proposals in terms of policy. Some of which I think, so for example, there's 20,000 new policemen, I think, has been suggested. And there's been some suggestions on the NHS as well. Some people will say that this is just electioneering. Again, maybe it is, maybe it's not. But a very interesting appointment, I think for us certainly in Croydon, has been Priti Patel, who is now is it the Home Secretary?
She is indeed.
She's the Home Secretary.
Almost exclusively female job now.
Yes, indeed. And she's the Home Secretary, and she's come up with some she says a very interesting things about what criminals should think going forward as the way they're going to be treated. How do you think Priti's doing so far, Mike?
It's just an absolute breath of fresh air to have a Home Secretary that believes in honest, decent, tax-paying citizens, not the scum of our society, who doesn't want to stand up for the criminal element but wants to stand up for reasonable people. You alluded to there. She says the fear should be on the criminals. Absolutely right. You should be fearful of being caught. You should be fearful of the punishment. You shouldn't be fearful because you've paid your taxes and you know full well that no cop will come up if you get invaded in your home. 20,000 police is a good start. More importantly is that they're able to do something, and she's making suggestions. I'm not really seeing it fully follow through yet, and to be fair, these things do take a little bit of time, but she's making suggestions of repealing Theresa May's hideous clamp down on stop and search, stopping it happening in the way it used to, that has led to a spike in knife crime and lots of young, predominantly ethnic minority men turning up in mortuaries. It's very well to sort of feel you're doing the right thing, but you actually have to do the right thing. Do good, not feel good. And Theresa May's policy, as anyone in Croydon knows, has led to a massive spike in crime, a massive spike in deaths, and Priti Patel is appearing to take action to reverse that.
Indeed, the tweaking of the stop and search rules has hopefully stopped this epidemic of knife crime that there certainly seems to be in London, and particularly in Croydon. It's pretty much on a weekly basis we hear of a stabbing somewhere in Croydon, and sadly often that seems to result in the death of one or more predominantly young men. An interesting story this week about the government's going to be advertising in chicken shops in relation to knife crime. I thought it was particularly interesting because the left, certainly the Guardian, etc., have said this is entirely racist, and the sort of racist connotations of that young black people tend to eat lots of fried chicken or some such. But what's particularly interesting is that the Guardian has moaned about this, but only a week earlier the Guardian ran a story in which they explained that some gang leaders have been focusing on chicken shops for recruitment purposes of the young members. So it seems like it's a double standard. But it's the Guardian. So what do you expect?
The Guardian's just a race baiting rag now.
Seems to be.
Unfortunately, so many of the Labour Party politicians. Again, it comes back to you don't just get to feel good, you've got to do good. If there is a Venn diagram that shows people going to chicken shops and the areas that there are lots of chicken shops, and if anyone knows South Norwood High Street or Thornton Heath High Street or Norbury High Street, there are lots of chicken shops, and those are the areas that there is lots of street crime and stabbings. Why would you not put those two facts together and advertise in them? It makes perfect sense. Crimes are obviously a really complex thing to solve, what we've got going on. And it's going to take a long time. It's going to be a lag. Things aren't going to change overnight. But if over the next few years a new generation comes up that says, if we act suspiciously, the police are likely to stop and search us. If we're carrying a knife, we're going to get prosecuted for that. If we go into a chicken shop, not a chicken shop, we go into the shops in our area and it's got a sign up saying that we're going to get prosecuted, it makes me think, oh yeah, my friend was prosecuted for this. I'm going to just leave the knife at home because I know there's a much greater probability of me getting caught and punished than there is of me feeling I need to have the knife on me. And actually, as other people don't carry knives, that feeling of needing to have it reduces. And then when two guys get into an argument, and two teenage boys, do you know what we know about teenage boys? They will get into arguments and there will be some fisticuffs. And do you know what? It will be fisticuffs. It won't be knives and stabbings because they won't have them on them. You can feel good and almighty in Guardian Towers with your offshore bank accounts if you want, but surely it's much more important that we've got a government that says this is a massive bloody problem. We don't want young men dead from pathetic arguments and street crimes. This is a way to tackle it, and I think it's an absolute breath of fresh air. We've got someone that's acting to do that.
Couldn't agree with you more. And an interesting suggestion that was I heard the other day was perhaps that because there's been these issues in the various communities where they felt that they were being picked on the previous stop and search regimes, but of course in recent years, police officers have now started having these kind of body cameras. So actually, everything's recorded. So if they are being overly officious, that's going to be recorded as part of any either prosecution or anything, or any complaint. So actually, there's a level of protection there certainly for the innocent young chap who may get stopped. So I'm very much in favour of it.
Just on that, police. I remember being a teenager in Croydon, and the police pulled us over in cars for no apparent reason. They were often quite rude. It was often troublesome. It wasn't very pleasant. It should be monitored, and action should be taken if people are out of line. On the other hand, we did used to speed. We were often out late. Anyone that knows me, I'm not exactly a troublesome character, and nor were any of my friends. So it's not like we cause a lot of trouble. But to be honest, if you were targeting young lads out in a motor car late at night, you probably are targeting the right sort of people. It shouldn't be like that. But if you are trying to tackle knife crime, there are areas of Croydon that knife crime happens, and that's where you act against it. Equally, there used to be, and it has massively stopped, areas of Glasgow that knife crime was a massive issue, and there would be working class communities in Glasgow, often Irish heritage, but some very much Protestant heritage, that would be targeted as well. And you can't blame the police for going where the trouble is. That is, after all, their job. There's precious little point. I live in Selsdon. There's precious little point doing a stop and search buzz on Selsdon High Street on a Thursday afternoon. Most of the pensioners are not carrying zombie knives. But Thornton Heath after school on a hot summer's day might be more appropriate. And I'm only quoting the statistics of stabbings.
No, definitely. I think it's worth possibly just touching on one further of the cabinet appointments. Jacob Rees-Mogg.
I think there's a few more I want to mention just quickly. But yes, Jacob. Isn't it a pleasure that the member for the 19th century has made it into the cabinet? Real stroke of genius making leader of the House. He knows procedure. He is that. His business career shows he has an incredible ability to master detail. Really, really pleasing to see. Annoyed all the right people as well. What can you say? I don't know, Dan. I thought there's been some other good ones though. I mean, what do you think about Dominic at Foreign Office?
Well, I think at this time, where we are, looking to reach out to countries far and wide, whether it be for trade purposes or diplomatic links, I think it's fantastic to have a leaver in that position. He obviously stuck by the withdrawal agreement briefly until he saw that he couldn't actually do anything about it, and then resigned as a matter of principle. A very intelligent and articulate chap who I'm sure will do the country proud.
I thought, and I appreciate he's a Remainer, but Sajid Javid as Chancellor of the Exchequer is a good appointment. Take away Brexit, be very happy with that appointment. Self-made multi-millionaire, grew up in very poor circumstances and clearly knows business. As a direct comparison to May's cabinet, Morgan and Rudd. Now, I'm not a fan of either. I could say a lot against either. But Boris has got to govern a whole party, and that is a coalition, and he needs to bring in other people that are willing to sign up to the 31st, and it appears they are. And nobody's ever accused them of not being capable of doing their jobs. You might not have agreed with them on stuff, but they are seen as being reasonably high performers. Under May's government, there was a load of cabinet members who everyone knew were a joke. Everyone knew they was a wonder they could tie their shoelaces up in the morning, in terms of cabinet level responsibility at least. And he's got rid of them. He's shown a lot of courage to bring in capable people, rather than people that are just leave them in the job so you don't upset them. So I think broadly across that they've done it's part of changing that whole tone of government that we've seen in the last couple of months.
Yeah, definitely going to be interesting time to see how these people get on, and obviously going to be interesting to see if we can get out on the 31st of October. I'm sure we'll be doing a podcast in between now and then, so we'll comment further on the way that Parliament behaves itself over the next couple of months. Speaking of politicians behaving themselves or not, as the case may be, Mike, this DEMOC. democratically elected mayor for Croydon, I believe. Why don't you tell our dear listeners what it's about?
So, as many of you will know, Croydon Council has 70-something councillors. I shouldn't really know that number, but there we go. 70-something councillors, of whom a slight majority are Labour. Almost all of the north of the borough, in fact all of the north of the borough is Labour, up to a line around about the middle of the borough, Addiscombe, South Croydon, although traditionally slightly further north of that, was the dividing line where everyone to the south of that, with the exception of New Addington and Fieldway, was Conservative. So you have a very, very polarised and split borough with a few key marginal wards that everyone fights over. The Labour majority then elect a leader, and that person becomes the leader of the council. They are where the power lies, and that currently is Tony Newman. Tony then appoints a cabinet. Many of you may have heard of some of them, but one that leaps to mind is Paul Scott. He was the chair of the planning committee. I believe he's now the vice chair, having stood down. But he is famous for ramming through very many unpopular housing developments across the borough. We also have a mayor, but they're a ceremonial mayor. So they manage the council meetings. They're a bit like a Speaker of the House for that. But largely what they do is put on a chain and turn up at an opening of an envelope or a cutting of a ribbon or what have you. And they're very good at that. Councillor Kabir is our current mayor. I've met him a number of times. He's really good at dealing with the community. He's been involved in a school I'm involved in. He's great. People just immediately shine to him. He plays the role, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but he plays the role of mayor with the people that meet him incredibly well. And he's not the first mayor I've dealt with. I have to say most of the ones I've met have been very good at it and really pleasing at it. But it's a ceremonial role. It's not a powerful role. The leader's the powerful role. Tony Newman, you might not have heard of him. Perhaps people listening to this podcast have. But we can't remove him. He was elected by a small group of Labour councillors. Over half the Labour councillors have some sort of extra payment. So most of them are on the payroll, as it's known. And they owe some authority or position thanks to his largesse. And we can't affect that. As a party, Labour really only concentrate on the middle few wards. And as a party, the Conservatives really only concentrate on the middle few wards. Conservatives know they've got Purley and Sanderstead and Causden and Kenley banked. Labour know that Norbury and Thornton Heath and South Norwood are banked. And there's no focus from either party, and councillors in private admit this, on those areas. So that was a long lead-in. The democratically elected Mayor of Croydon is a proposal to change the constitution of the borough so that we have a powerful executive mayor who's elected. They appoint a cabinet. There are still councillors that can hold them to account and hold some constraint on them, but most of the power and proposals will come from the mayor. Not unlike it does in London, and it does in some neighbouring boroughs. So that's where the power's held. Now, the advantage we feel about this is that you look at a number of things in Croydon. Who do you hold account? Who's accountable for the failure of Westfield? Who's accountable for the overrun of the Fairfield Halls? Who's accountable for the rising knife crime? Who's accountable for these building developments popping up that seem to do nothing but cause distress? They haven't produced any council housing. They barely produce any affordable housing. In fact, they barely produce any housing at all. They just put blights of building works on places from what I can see at the moment. We have inadequate children's services. We have all these problems, and there's no one that steps forward that you know about. So, Dan, you're very involved in politics, so I want to pick on you. Who's in charge of children's services in Croydon?
Haven't the foggiest.
Absolutely. And now this one might be one you know. Who's in charge of housing?
No, don't know.
No. So you've got Alison Butler for the last one, for instance. Now, if it's a mayor, it's the mayor. The mayor's responsible for it because they're the one we elected, and they're the one we're going to kick out if they don't improve things. And that's a really useful, important thing. Last thing I'd say on this, they're going to have to win votes from everywhere. Croydon's a split borough. At the European elections, it was almost the exact four-way vote between the Brexit Party, the Lib Dems, Labour and Conservatives. Most elections are pretty much a 50-50 split between the Conservatives and Labour. That mayor is going to have to, a Labour mayor is going to have to win 15-20% of the vote in Purley and Selsdon, and a Conservative mayor is going to have to win 15-20% of the vote in Upper Norwood and West Croydon. And that very fact means that they have got to listen to people from across the borough and all over the borough if they want to do anything, if they want to win re-election or election in the first place. And that means they're going to have to deliver for all of us, not just one part and not just a few marginal wards. So that's why I'm very enthusiastic about it. It's a new campaign. It's just starting. We will be trying to put up some stuff pro and con it. There will be disadvantages, and we're happy to, if we can find people to write about that, we'll put it up on our website. But it's a new campaign that's starting. You can have a look at their website, which is DEMOC, DEMOC.org.uk. They're also on Facebook. If you look on Facebook and look for elected Mayor of Croydon, and you can see the campaign's going. We've got to gather tens of thousands of signatures, and this is what we're doing at the moment. Gathering signatures, and they have to be physical signatures, so we may be knocking on your door soon. Those signatures will sign a petition to force a referendum on the issue. So we don't have all the answers for this right now, but it's getting the petition together, forcing a referendum, and then campaigning for an elected mayor, or not. And some of you may fall on the other side. But it's giving the people a choice and a vote, and there's never anything bad about that.
No, I think it's a very interesting campaign. As you say, there are probably pros and cons, and we'll happily discuss those via our website and no doubt in due course on the podcast. But yeah, I think the point about any candidate seeking to win or to be re-elected having to seek votes from all over the borough, I think that's a very interesting point, because as you say, there are half a dozen at the most key marginal wards, and that's where all of the resources go into at election time, and that's all they really care about. Labour doesn't give two hoots about what monstrous buildings it builds in the south, and similarly, if the Conservatives are in, they've got no ambition to win anywhere in the north of the borough, so they don't try. So very very interesting campaign. It'll be interesting to see how it develops in due course. So that's that. What we've been up to, Mike. So we've had a couple of street stalls in recent months working with the Taxpayers Alliance. We were out in the Croydon Town Centre and later in Addiscombe. How do you feel those went?
Really good. Again, the Taxpayers Alliance supporting us makes a huge difference. An organised, great organisation that just provides a bit of professionalism, professional service that we can make use of. They've produced a great leaflet for us on that basis, and the street stalls were highlighting how much some of the people are paid in the borough, and it's part of the Taxpayers Alliance High Tax Town Hall Rich List Roadshow. And the Town Hall Chief Executive in Croydon is paid £212,000. There are 18 other bosses paid over 100 grand. And when you point this out to people, they are staggered. Even the most cynical among us are surprised at how much town hall bosses are paid. What was really interesting, I thought, in Addiscombe was a number of people stopping by who worked for the council, and were quite shocked and amazed at the pay rates there. People, it resonates that. I've just gone through some of the things I think are wrong in Croydon. I think most of us will agree about. But don't worry, we're not paying a premium for. Oh no, hang on, sorry, we are paying an absolute premium for this. There's 5 or 6 people on this list paid more than the Prime Minister. I mean, is it really more difficult to run Croydon than it is to run Great Britain? It's a ludicrous amount of money going with very little accountability, and it's great to be out highlighting that.
Yeah, definitely. I thought the 2 street stalls went splendidly, and really good response from people. And it was just about raising awareness of what's going on, because certainly these things, the information is available, but you really have to go and look for it. And the Taxpayers Alliance is very good at doing that. We've got another street stall coming up, this time in Selsdon on Saturday the 7th of September from 10:30 till 1 o'clock outside the Sir Julian Huxley pub. So do please get in touch and come along if you'd like to help out with that. I'm sure we'll be having a couple of beers afterwards in the pub.
One thing we'll be doing on Saturday the 7th as well is asking people to sign an open letter to all the political parties in Croydon that in the future they won't employ anyone new or more than the Prime Minister. So that's not, people in important jobs need to be well paid. You need to pay the right rate for the job. I don't believe that rate is £213,000, by the way. But let's cap it at a reasonable level. These aren't like private sector jobs. You don't have to bring in any income. If we don't pay our council tax, we go to jail. We're not forced to buy their product. Sorry, we are forced to buy their product. In the private sector, no one's forced to buy your product. That's why people really get paid well, is not controlling costs, it's about bringing in income. These people don't have to worry about that. These are ludicrous salaries. So what we're asking is that all political parties in Croydon say for future appointments, you can't change the ones that have been made, for future appointments don't pay anyone more than the Prime Minister. That's not an outrageously low sum that we're trying to get away with here. If you agree with that, drop us a line. We'll add your name to the petition, to the letter, and it'd be great if you can help us get some signatures in Selsdon on the 7th.
Great stuff. And just finally, we've got another Leavers of Croydon drinks coming up. Mike, when is that, and where are we doing that?
Next drinks are on Wednesday the 21st of August, the Foxley Hats in Purley, starting at 7pm, so that's the Wetherspoons in Purley on Wednesday the 21st. Come on down, be a good turnout as usual, I hope, or I expect, and have a few drinks, enjoy the summer sun or rain as it may be, and catch up and discuss Brexit and many other issues. Yeah,
really looking forward to that. So just finally, if you've got any stories of waste from Croydon Council or any other South London Council, do get in touch with us and let us know. We're always interested to know about the shenanigans in any town hall. Mike, how can people get in touch with us?
Yes, so we're on Twitter at Croydon Const. We're on Facebook at Croydon Constitutionalists. Our website is croydonconstitutionalist.uk, and our email is croydonconstitutionalist@gmail.com.
Cheers. So that's it for today. We'll be doing a podcast in due course, and we've obviously got our future events of the Taxpayers Alliance stall and the Leavers of Croydon drinks. As Mike said, there's many ways to get in touch with us, and please do. So until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Goodbye.